Hey everybody, welcome on into ClayShare Live. I'm Jessica Putnam-Phillips. Tonight we are going to be talking about and looking at the new Mayco Stoneware Glazes for 2023. You know, we had a couple years Mayco didn't come out with some new glazes, so this year they decided to release not the usual 6 glazes. Sometimes companies do 4, sometimes they do 6. Mayco is really known for doing 8 at a time, but not this year. This year they did 12, which is a lot of new colors. So we've got the 12 new Mayco Stoneware Glazes. I got the sample kit. These were limited edition. Your local Mayco supplier may or may not still have them, so check if you want to get the sample kit. You get this little jar of each one of the colors when you get the kit. I got the last one they had at Vermont Ceramic Supply. Sorry everybody in Vermont, but she was going to try to get more. So you get these little jars to test out, and this size jar is enough to definitely do a test tile or test plates, as well as at least a mug on the outside. So you can get a good piece glazed with the glaze that comes in one of these jars, so you can really get a feel for whether you want this glaze or not. So I used every one of them on this test plate, and I put 3 coats, so I did 1 coat, 2 coat, 3 coats, so I have lines where I can see. I also put the Mayco Dark Flux and Light Flux on the edge, because I often use those fluxes and I want to see what they're going to do. So we're going to go through this plate in detail, and I'll talk about it, and we'll talk about the glazes in particular, what you're going to want to use them for, what you do not want to use them for, because that's just as important as knowing what to use them for. Now, as you'll notice, I did this on a test plate, and I do have a class on making your own underglaze test plate, but you can make a glaze test plate. So this is a great way to have all of one company's product, or all of maybe take all the underglazes you have in your studio and you make one test plate. And then the way I made this is I can put wires in the back and I can hang this, which I don't know if you can see over here. I got some hanging already, but I have about 10 or so of these plates from all different types of clay, types of glazes, shapes, doesn't really matter. They just make it easy for me to hang it on the wall and see at a glance very quickly what the glazes or underglazes look like. So it's a really nice reference to have. But if you don't want to do a plate, you don't have to. You know, you can do the stand-up test tiles. I got these right here. You know, those are standard. You could do a flat piece like this, and I've got all of the colors on. These are my Celadons. They're not the new Mayco, but we're going to be glazing with these and the Mayco in prime time next. So this is so I can hang this as well. It has a hole, and I can see at a glance. So if you don't want to do a big plate, don't do a big plate. Do something like a flower. This cutter is made by De La Design Gifts, so that's where I got this cutter. It's great for making flowers that are sculptural, but you can also make test tiles. Now, I do have a class on making a wheel thrown test tile ring, so all you wheel throwers, you want to make some fast test tiles, check that out. You could also roll out a slab, and I did do Georgie's interactive pigment test tiles. I did a class on that, and here's some examples of these. And these are just little circles that I cut out using a cookie cutter with texture, because, you know, it's nice to have texture so you can see. We'll come over here to camera 2 so you guys can see what's going on. But again, these aren't the Mayco glazes. I went to do the test tiles, and I ran into an issue. I had test tiles, but I didn't have 12 test tiles that were all the same way. I had this wheel thrown one. These are porcelain. So these here are 2 porcelain test tiles. This is a B-mix test tile. I didn't want to do 12 new glazes on 6 different clays. I need to have one clay body to start out with. So that is why I chose to do the test plate. And those of you who watched Good Morning ClayShare yesterday morning, yeah, I'm in the future, who caught it yesterday morning, we glazed this in that broadcast. And we have had regional internet issues, so I'm not sure if that's been put up or not. So here's this right here. And I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to zoom it in, and I'm actually going to physically pull it back because I don't want the shadow in there. All right, so you found a set of these in Canada at Sounding Stone. Good, so you can test them out. I really like having a small sample of new glazes. I wouldn't buy a pint of all these. It would be risky. What if I buy the pint and I get home and I use it and I hate it, and now I've just, you know, invested in that big container of glaze? I don't want to do that. So this here is on Laguna 16 porcelain. That's the clay that I used. It's just a really nice cone 5/6 white clay body, and it's what I had available in the studio to do my test tiles with, so that's what I used. So I'm going to get the brightest possible result by using that clay, and because all of the glazes are on the same clay body, it's a nice consistent result comparing the tones of the glazes. Because if I had this gloss coral on a white clay body and then the gloss pink on a dark clay body, that could affect the way that the glaze looks, and I wouldn't get a true result. So I wouldn't really know what's happening there. So that's why we did it on the porcelain. All right. What else is going on? Let me share this information with you. We are partnering with Clayscapes Pottery for the month for a Mayco extravaganza. They're doing 20% off Mayco products. Stoneware glaze pints, stoneware washes, fundamentals, underglazes, lusters, brushes, stroke and coats, and designer liners and all that stuff. And the code is Mayco 2023, all lowercase, and that's only at clayscapespottery.com. And that's only good through the end of this month. So these new Mayco glazes, if you see one you like and you want to pick up a pint, now's your chance to do so and save. So will I also test it at cone 10, and would it be reduction or oxidation? Well, I will not do a test at cone 10 because my cone 10 kiln is a gas kiln, and it's currently at my old studio and needs to be taken apart and transferred up here because we're building a new studio. Yes, you can fire these cone 5 to cone 10. If you want to see cone 10 results for these, go to ClayShare Con from this year. Mayco showed them, and you can actually see real-life samples that Todd from Mayco shared with all of us. So you can see those, but I'm not going to do these cone 10. When I fire cone 10, I do reduction. I don't do oxidation. These, I believe most people use them cone 10 oxidation if they do cone 10 with them. But you all tell me, what do you do? But my kiln is set up for a gas reduction kiln. It's not an oxidation kiln. Yeah, you can do oxidation in it, but I don't. All right, you want to see the glazes? Let's talk about that. All right, here we go. We're going to start with gloss coral, and when you get the stoneware little samples, you get these little tiny jars like this. Normally, when you get a jar of Mayco glaze, it's going to look like this. It'll have a nice color swatch on it, so you get an idea of what that glaze should look like. That's really handy. It has all the information on it, and then it has instructions on how to glaze, and then all of your safety information and all that's on here as well. So with the little sample kits, they don't really do that. They don't have the space, and since they're a limited sample kit, you're not going to have all the information on the actual jar, but they do have on the cover this. So this is nice because it gives you an idea of what it could look like, right? But you won't really know unless you fire it in your studio or the studio you use on the clay you're going to use the most to the temperature you fire to. Because this is what Mayco got in their studio, right, and the way they fire it, but you might not fire the same way. So all these glazes here have been tested, and the only two that are not dinnerware safe are let me make sure I say it right because I don't, are the Fossil Rock and there was one other, Riptide. And that isn't because it's poisonous. That's because it's not dinnerware safe because it's not recommended for dinnerware use. It's not the same as food safe though. So could you use it on foodware? It's not recommended for it, but it's not because of safety. It's because the surface is satiny, matte, and it's not great for food use. So it'll show a lot of marks and potentially could over time chip, and that would be a bad thing, right? So this is what they look like in the jars. This is what it looks like in the little box. Let's go through the tests. So you cut the swatches out and glue them to the lids of the sample jars, right? Because what am I going to do with this box? I mean, I got this box now, which is great, but eventually I'm not going to keep this box forever. And so you can just peel this off, stick the little samples onto your jar, and now you got it. So that's a brilliant idea. I do like that. All right, let's talk about the actual glazes. All right, so on porcelain, and we did apply these together. I glazed this yesterday morning, so this just was done. I just did it. So we'll start here at the top, and this is the gloss coral. And this is more of a opaque glaze. It's a solid colored glaze, a little flat in a very stable, static glaze, meaning it's not moving a lot. It doesn't have a lot of interest in it on its own. I think it would be a great glaze for layering underneath things, but by itself, it's, I'm going to zoom in close, really close, so that you guys can see. There we go. So by itself, it's just a good coral. So if you really want a coral glaze, this might be the glaze for you, right? But you can see it is a nice gloss. Surface quality is nice. I didn't get any pinholing. And this was at 3 coats up here. So it held up really well. Now, this is Mayco Light Flux 1 coat, Mayco Dark Flux 1 coat. I don't think the flux does much for it at all. It's just sitting on the surface. So I don't know. I think this would be a nice layered one. But by itself, it's just there. You could use it if you were doing something and you wanted to highlight a certain area. Maybe you have a floral element or something, an applique type element, and you want to paint that color on it. All right, so if we go to the pink gloss, basically the same type of glaze. It's an opaque pink. I actually really like the color. It's very pretty. I think there's a lot of potential for layering. Again, with the light and dark fluxes, it didn't really do much. Not at all, did it, really? It's just kind of sitting there. Now I want to compare it. This is my Briar Rose. That's my pink. So they are similar. My pink is a little more purple, but also my pink's a Celadon, so it's going to really show your texture. This pink gloss is going to fill in texture a bit, especially at 3 coats, so keep that in mind. But on a non-textured surface, you're going to get a nice, solid colored glaze. I think it's a good glaze for that. So the coral's good, the pink's good. They're not super exciting because there's not a lot of movement in them, but sometimes you want a quiet glaze. Maybe you don't want that excitement. And then the rose quartz, which I thought I would get more movement out of this glaze here. I'm surprised how kind of tannish it's looking. I thought there'd be more crystalline structure in the glaze itself. I don't know, it's got a little bit down here. Now, you'll notice though, when we put the fluxes on, look at the difference between the light flux here on the rose quartz versus the light flux on the pink gloss. Pink gloss didn't really change at all, but the rose quartz, we got some movement out of it. And that's because the rose quartz glaze itself is gonna flux more. The glaze itself is gonna run more. So these two, the coral and pink glosses, they're just gonna stay where you put them. But when you go with the rose quartz, that's a bit of a mover and shaker. So they're on a vertical surface with texture. I think you could get some really interesting effects with the rose quartz. So I'm excited to try this some more. I do plan to be glazing in prime time next, so we're going to use that rose quartz. I think I like it, but again, I do need to do more testing, right? Because that's what it's all about. So your coral test came out a little more vibrant and more orange on your white stoneware than it did on my porcelain, which is weird because the porcelain is the brightest, although Tucker's Mid Smooth Stone Spec, that clay, everything comes out really bright on. That's 66 Laguna there, this one, that's a white clay, but it's not as white as this one. All right, Amaryllis. This is one of their crystals that has the little crystals inside it, and that's what these little, like, colored dots are in there. And I really like the Amaryllis. So I want to show you up close. 1 coat, 2 coat, 3 coats. Do you see the difference when we get to coat 2 and coat 3? Let me turn it like that. So coat 1, It's too light. You need at least 2 coats. Coat 2 is got some, but it's a little faded. Coat 3, really you get some nice color on it, and then your crystals really come out too. So I would definitely do the amaryllis at 3 coats. But again, anytime we have these crystals on a vertical surface, they're going to run more. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure you only do 2 coats near the bottom. Maybe 1 coat right up at the bottom and then come up about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch and start your second coat 1/8 of an inch up, and then go up another 1/8 of an inch with your third coat. Because you want to make sure you have room for things to run so they don't run onto your kiln shelf, right? This is the really exciting part though. Can you see right here on Instagram, folks? Maybe I can hook you guys up a little more. There you go. Right here is the really exciting part for me. The dark flux is okay, but look at this light flux. Look at how we got that beginning of a hare's fur pattern. That's what happens here where it looks like a waterfall. See right in here? This is where things get really exciting for me. So you can see how it's starting to do almost dendritic tendrils. So right here, I know this combo is going to be something I'm going to explore more. The dark flux does it a tiny bit, but that dark is really dark and it's very overpowering, and I don't think I would like it on this piece. But we do have these dark flecks, so it might be worth it to do a test on another piece, a vertical piece like a cup, using this amaryllis with the light flux and the dark flux on 2 separate pieces, and see how you like the tone of it. I also think with a textured piece, you're going to lose your texture because this glaze is opaque, it's not translucent. So if you're going to do a textured piece, what you're going to want to do is use another glaze, maybe for the bottom half, like a celadon, and then use this amaryllis on the top. And we're actually going to do this exact thing in prime time. We're going to use the light flux with the amaryllis and a celadon underneath in a textured piece. So that's going to happen. Now, we're going to keep going over the sand dollar. So the sand dollar, you can see, is a little more translucent. See the Mayco black underglaze pencil that I drew with? That's what I used here to draw my lines. Even at 3 coats with the sand dollar, you can still see the Mayco underglaze pencil. So this sand dollar would be a good one. You know, you're going to see some texture and you're going to see breaking. So Jennifer, you said you're surprised how translucent the amaryllis is. When it's thin, yeah, look at that. But when we get up here to the thicker, it's going to fill in quite a bit, especially when we put the flux on. Although, I don't know, we'll see. We're going to put on texture. We're going to find out. So anyhow, back to the sand dollar. Again, I think this would be a good layering one, but it's just kind of it looks like a sand dollar. It's like the color of a sand dollar, maybe a little tanner. So if you're looking for some beachy colors, something to go underneath, a layer, maybe this would be good. The flux did start to melt a bit, but not nearly as nicely as what we have over here on the amaryllis. So yeah, not really exciting. I guess I'll wait till the end to say if I would buy some of these. Like, would I actually go back and buy pints? Because I bought the sample kit. Would I buy a pint? We'll wait. Now, I think the fossil rock has a lot more interest going on, and that's the other one that's not recommended for dinnerware, because it's this satin matte surface, and you can also see how there's a bit of a very fine crystalline structure to this glazed surface. That's why we're not getting a high gloss. You got all these micro crystals in here, and it creates like, you know, like frosting, almost like it's frosted. And I really like this. I think it's really pretty. The light flux started to do some interesting things too. So if you wanted a very neutral, soft palette, I think the fossil rock and the light flux could give you that. Also, the fossil rock is a bit translucent too, so I think this could work well with texture. Now, because it's not dinnerware safe, does that mean you cannot use it on dinnerware? Well, you can always use it on the outside of a mug or a cup. It's perfectly fine there. I wouldn't put it on a plate, at least not on the center where you're going to be cutting or scraping with a knife or a fork or a spoon or something. But outside of a cup, be perfectly fine. So if you use the brown on a wood grain texture, do I think the texture will show? It might. And again, we're looking at this on porcelain, so we can only see and judge these colors based on a white smooth clay. So it's just step one in the whole testing process, right? So we would need to test this on a dark clay. So make a plate with dark clay, test it on texture. And for texture tests, I like to do vertical things, planters and cups and such. All right, so moving on, we have the Riptide, and I really like the Riptide a lot. So one coat down here, you get a little bit brighter turquoise color. It's like a sea bluish color, blue-green, I would say. And then 2 coats to 3 coats, they're almost the same right up in here. And this also has that microcrystalline structure and looks frosted. And you see what I'm talking about with that frosting? It looks like someone took a gloss glaze and then it got frost all over it. See how you have like the white on there almost on top? I like that a lot. And again, I believe the Riptide is the other non-dinnerware recommended. But on the outside of a mug, sure, you could totally put it there. And again, the light flux did some really interesting things. Do you see at the top here? So there's some interesting stuff. The blue is actually coming through the light flux and changing that light flux. So this is definitely worth testing some more. So I'm going to have to get some of this. I want to see. We're going to have computer problems tonight. It is raining like crazy here, so we will see. All right, the next one is Ivy. And this is 1 coat, 2 coats down in here, and 3 coats up in here. So you can see how much more opaque it gets. It's a green. It's like an ivy. It's not a high gloss shine, but it is a gloss. I would say it's more of a satin gloss right in there. And then the light flux is almost gone. Do you see how it basically absorbed the light flux? So if you wanted to use this with light flux, you might need to put more light flux on it. And then the dark flux. Now I think this is definitely one to go with the dark flux on. I think there could be more interest. The dark flux went really brown on this. You see that? And I think you get a very woodsy effect with the Ivy. Now, I have a ton of greens and I have a bunch of my own greens. Would I buy Ivy? I love the Mayco green tea, so I probably would just stick with the green tea and not add another green to it. But if you don't have a green yet, this could be a green for you. All right, Nimbus, which is this purpley color, like a purpley gray color, almost charcoaly, like graphite-y. And it also has not quite as much of a matte surface, but it does have a little bit of a satin gloss surface to it. I'm trying to get a sheen, barely. And then again, the fluxes, the light flux is completely gone. You can't see that at all. I mean, it's barely anything. And then the dark flux sort of stayed. So maybe try again with some dark flux and see what happens. You would get a gloss finish in contrast to this satiny finish. But I don't know. I think it would definitely I need to do another test with it on texture, because I think this could be one that looks amazing when you put it on a textured piece. And again, we only have this flat surface to go off of, but we have to start somewhere, right? The next one I was really excited to see, because it's kind of a weird glaze, because it's a dark purple glaze with specks in it, the little crystals in it. And the crystals are a lavender, there's like a peach, there's a dark, dark blue. So there's some interesting colors happening in here. And I was really intrigued by it. 1 coat is not gonna do it. 1 coat is very muddy and it's just nothing. 2 coats, pretty good. 3 coats where it's at for this glaze right here. Also, it's another gloss. Let's see if I can get you can see the shine. But we're not having any problems with pinholing or crazing. So we've got good glaze fit and good firing on this. The next one is, let's talk about the fluxes. Again, the light flux and the dark flux both have some interest, I think. So it's worth testing. I like the light because the light flux brings out the peachy tones, but then I like the dark flux because it brings out those deep, dark blue, deep purple tones. So I'm going to have to do some testing with both fluxes on the passion flower. And then the peppered plum. So there was 3 of these like speckly crystalline glazes in this kit, and the peppered plum is the 3rd one. And I wasn't too interested in this because it looked like kind of a blah brown, but it's really beautiful. This has nice surface quality. 1 coat is not enough. We've already figured that out. We need to do 2, maybe 3. 3 is up here. And then look how beautiful the light flux. I want to get, how close can I get? Look how beautiful the light flux is. The dark flux is beautiful too, but look at this. This is that hare's fur starting, the waterfall effect. That's what we want from something like a flux. And even the dark flux has some stuff happening. So peppered plum, yeah, I didn't think I was going to like it. I was really not interested in it. But again, I think this is one that if I did a layer, maybe you could use the gloss brown that's next as your bottom layer. I don't know. We'll talk about that. We'll go to that now. But I like the peppered plum. All right, so let's talk about the gloss brown. There was 3 just gloss glazes in this kit. The gloss brown, the gloss coral, and the gloss pink. They are what they are. They are a gloss solid colored glaze. If you're looking for a solid brown, solid coral, solid pink, these are great. They'll work for you. You know you've got a food safe glaze, dinnerware safe glaze. They work well. We're not having crazing or glaze fit issue. I'm not getting any pinholing. So it's kind of a foolproof glaze if you're looking for these colors. But there's not a lot of excitement happening here and not a lot going on by themselves. So you might want to do something to jazz them up, or use them in a fashion where maybe you're glazing 1 section brown or 1 section coral, or if you have some other colors. The light flux though, it did start to get a little interesting right in here. So that's kind of nice. More stuff to test, right? But we'll talk about that in a second. We'll talk about that. All right, zoom it out a little bit. So there we have the whole plate. And let's see if you guys got questions. The Sand Dollar and Riptide would look great for a beach look. I do agree that the Sand Dollar and the Riptide and the Fossil Rock, I think these 3 here, these 3 down here, would be a really nice beachy palette. We won't look at that green, but I really like the Fossil Rock and the Riptide myself. But the Sand Dollar is listed as dinnerware safe. So you do the inside with your Sand Dollar, and then you do the outside with your Riptide of a cup or something, and then you're keeping with that beachy, or maybe the bottom 1/3 of the outside in this Sand Dollar, and then the top 2/3 with the Riptide. So there's lots. So you're disappointed how the Nimbus looks. I've seen the Nimbus look different on texture. And when it went thick, I mean, you can kind of see Nimbus does run. But do you see where it went thick right here? And that's one thing you have to watch. When your glazes go really thick, there's a little tiny pinhole. I don't know if you can see. Let me see if I can get that. It's right there by the tip of this. I don't know if you can see it. But that's a thing that happens a lot when you have a glaze that runs in pools. You might get these little tiny pinholes down in there. Sometimes they're okay, but if they're too thick and there's too many of them, that glaze could actually be prone to popping off, like over time in use. So let's see if there's, so the bleed from the Ivy to Riptide looks cool. Well, that's the other thing, right? So now that we've put this on a plate and there is a bit of overlap in the colors, you can see what would happen if, say, the Ivy and Riptide right here, yeah, there's an overlap. So there's something happening there with these 2 glazes. So what do you guys think? Is a matte clear okay for dinnerware plates? So let's talk about that. We can talk about that. So the problem is, and I have classes on dinnerware safe versus food safety. That's a huge thing in pottery. So you want a glaze that's food safe no matter what. No matter what you're doing, you want it to be food safe, unless you're doing sculptural wear and you never have to worry about it ever coming in contact with a person eating from it, right? So if it's food safe, technically you can use food safe glazes on any dinnerware. But what tends to happen is we have glazes that are now classified as dinnerware appropriate. And those would be glazes that the surfaces just over time won't wear that well. They're more prone to showing knife marks or spoon marks from being used. They're more difficult to clean. And so those are glazes that are matte or a satin matte, the drier glazes. They are just more difficult to keep clean. They're not impossible to clean. They're just not as easy as a gloss or a glossy satin. Those are the glazes that people like the most because over time your dinnerware stays looking nice. Nobody really wants their dinnerware to change over time and look like in 6 months all scratched up. You know, if you're making it for yourself, that's fine. But if you're making it to sell, your customer is going to be disappointed that the beautiful plates that you handmade for them now are all scratched up and just not as nice as they were when they first purchased them. So that they're saying for the Nimbus and the Riptide, were those the ones? Let me double check. No, the Fossil Rock and the Riptide, those here are not unsafe as far as a safety thing. They're saying it's not dinnerware safe, so they're not appropriate for use for dinnerware because of the surface quality. Ideally, you want a glossy glaze for your foodware, but can you use a matte? You do whatever you want, but it doesn't always come out really well. So you think the glazes look very different from what you saw during ClayShare Con and at NCECA, and they do look different. I mean, when you do these at home, they're going to look very different for you than they might look for me because you're going to use your clay. This was fired to 2167. I did a 13-minute hold at the end. It got to a solid cone 5, so I fired a cone 5. You might fire to cone 6. You'll get different results with these. They'll melt more at cone 6. They could potentially be more glossy at cone 6. They definitely will shift in color when you get to cone 10. And because these are a cone 5 to cone 10 glaze, that means you could fire them to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you can fire these at 6 different cone temperatures. That's a huge range. And at each cone, there's going to be shifts. You're going to get color shifts. You're going to get melting. You're going to have different surface quality happening. So whatever clay you're using and what temperature you fire to, that's going to really determine how the glaze ends up looking for you. And then the clay, right? The clay makes a huge difference. This is Laguna 16 porcelain. It's just a warm white clay. It's just white. That's it. Nothing going on. If we fired these on B-Mix, they'd probably look a little different. You'd probably get a little more depth in the colors potentially because you have a little more tan in that. Same thing if we fired it on, let me see what I go here for test tiles. I gotta make some more test tiles. So if I fired it on Georgie's Pioneer dark clay with specks, right? So that's a totally different clay. And you would get different results because it's a darker clay. And the same thing with any speckled clay. The Georgie's Dark Chocolate Trail Mix. This is one of my favorite dark clays. If you like dark clays and you can get Georgie's, get their Dark Chocolate Trail Mix. It does not have manganese in it. A lot of dark clays, that's what they use to make it dark, but Georgie's doesn't, so you don't have to worry about exposure to manganese. I know that's a thing that comes up a lot amongst potters, but look how great. This is a really dark clay, and I need to do some samples so I can test these out on that. All right, let's see if you all got questions for me. So would a matte clear be okay inside, say, a mug, since it doesn't really get scratched and washed, or standard shiny clear is better? A standard shiny clear is going to be better because what will happen with your matte clear in a mug, if people drink coffee or tea out of it, it will stain that matte clear faster because that matte glaze will allow bits of that coffee or tea to stay, so it'll stain it. So you don't want, that's the other thing with matte glazes, they stain easier. Satin glazes sometimes will stain as well. So a gloss glaze is going to be easy to clean and you won't get that staining. Yeah. The matte glazes, the staining is really sad on it because they look just dingy and dirty even though they're clean. They just don't look nice. You're making plates for your son. Oh, Kathy, he's going to love them. And Jennifer fired to a hot cone 6, and she, let's see, she had a little bit of slower cool to allow crystals. So mine was a slower cool, and actually I think a lot of them are much more satiny than I expected. I thought I'd have a higher gloss, but I didn't. That's okay. I thought the Nimbus would be drier, and I thought the Rose Quartz would be drier. I think I would like them to see if I get more of that frosty on it, right? Can you put a zinc-free clear over the satin or matte glaze to get a gloss appearance? So you can do that. You're changing the glaze completely. It's probably going to run. The color might shift on it. Who knows what will happen, but test it, and it might be fine. But you're now putting another glaze on a glaze, so you're putting an extra layer of glaze on. So if you have a color you're in love with and you want that color, then I would suggest doing that. Give it a test and see. But ideally, you find a glaze that you really like the color and the surface finish of all in one package, so we can just glaze it with that one glaze, or maybe another layer on top for effect, right? But doing that extra step of putting a clear glaze on a matte glaze, I've never done it, but you can. I mean, there's no rules saying you can't, right? So if you use the, let's see, Studio makes little cookies and the glaze is on them and glues them to the top of the jar. So if, oh, for their little samples, yeah. And a lot of times with my buckets, because I'll mix, for my glazes, a lot of times I do the dip and pour glazes, and that's why I like these little guys right here, because now I have a little glaze sample that I can tie and hang here, and it says on the back what it was, and it can hang on the bucket. Yeah, these are great because you can do that with it, and you actually have the physical glaze sample there on the bucket. And then a lot of times in people's glaze rooms, they'll have a wall of glaze samples, and your glazes are also in there. So you just have them on the wall, so you don't have to worry about anything ever happening to it. And that's what I'll be doing in my glaze room in the new studio, is we'll have everything on the wall when that gets done. So very exciting for that. I want to see if I have any questions. Do I order from Georgie's and pay for shipping? I do, Janet, and that is why I only have one box of dark chocolate trail mix. Just the one, because I get it in a flat rate box. So I buy the Georgie's clay in the flat rate box, and it's expensive. So for me, I live in Vermont, all the way across the country. If Georgie's had somebody closer to me selling their clay, I would get it from them. So I don't buy Georgie's a lot. Honestly, I've been buying Tucker's clay a lot. I'm really enjoying the Tucker's. I'm going to be trying some of their darker clays. Who else am I trying? I'm using Laguna. Their dark clays, I like their 90 and their 60, but I haven't found a dark chocolate one that's as good as Georgie's. So yeah, I do. I pay to have it shipped, and it is an expense. But what you do is, when you pay X amount, you know, this is all about pricing our work, right? So if you're making pottery to sell, you have to look at your bottom line and how much it costs to get those materials into you. So for me, that 50 pounds of clay no longer costs what the clay costs. It's the clay plus the shipping is now the true cost of that clay. Oh, thank you. That's my landed cost. Exactly. So I have to figure that out. So if it costs me $60 to get 50 pounds of clay, let's just make it $50, 50 pounds, so I can do easy math. So it's $1 per pound, right? And if I use 4 pounds to make a bowl, well, that's costing me $4 in clay. You double that to get your cost, so that's 8, and then you double that again to get your retail, so that's 16. So you at least have to charge $16 for just your clay for that one bowl, and then your time and your overhead, and everything else that goes into pricing your work, which I do have a class on that breaks everything down. There's a lot in the business of pottery, and you have to do it that way. If you're making pots to sell, you have to keep track of how much it costs, how much everything costs. I know it's not fun, but you've got to do it. And once you do it and you have all the information in front of you, it'll be really easy to say, yeah, I'm going to buy this clay and it's going to be really expensive, but it's okay, because I'm going to sell my mugs for X amount of dollars and people will buy them and I'll recoup the costs. And, you know, that's just how business goes. Now, if you're doing it for yourself, for fun, then you have to look at, is it worth it to you? How much enjoyment is that clay going to bring you? And so maybe you do it as a treat once in a while, and you get yourself a box of and it doesn't even matter that it's DeGiorgi's. It could be anything, you know. There's something you really like, but it's really, you think, expensive to use in your studio. So you just treat yourself to that once in a while. That's what I do. So that's how I justify it. And it seems to work. All right. Staining, yes. The staining is can be a big thing. All right, so is that all I got for tonight? We are going to be, all week long, we're going to be doing Mayco. Next week, what am I doing next week? Did I say yet? So tonight we're giving away a $25 gift certificate to Clayscapes Pottery. We're going to do one every Wednesday of the month. We'll have a giveaway. So a $25 gift certificate. To enter, you just go to ClayShare.com or download the ClayShare app. And then you go to ClayShare.com and sign up for our email list, right? And next week, we're going to be talking about Mayco underglazes and different ways you can use underglazes. And then on the 17th, we're going to be doing the Mayco lusters. You know, Duncan used to make all the lusters, and then Mayco bought Duncan's. So now it's the Mayco lusters, but they're the same as Duncan's. And the ones I use are food safe, which is important. Check your lusters. Then on the 24th, I'm going to be showing you some things I made with the Mayco Stroke and Coat and Designer liners. And then in our private class, we have a special surface decoration class for my premium members. And what else we got? On the 31st, the last day of May, I'm going to share my favorite glaze combos. And I'm interested to see if there's going to be some new ones from this in my favorite Mayco glaze combos. Because I have some over there on the wall that are my favorite Mayco, my favorite all-time Mayco combos. Because, you know, I have glazes that I just really like for whatever reason, and I keep using the combos. But we're gonna go ahead and share those on the 31st. All right, so the app on your tablet's taking 30 seconds ahead of TV, so the comments are off. Oh, technology, I know. So that code for 20% off the Mayco products is Mayco, M-A-Y-C-O 2023, all lowercase for the Mayco. And you just go to Clayscapes Pottery. It's only through Clayscapes, so just keep that in mind. It's not through anybody else. So with your test tiles, you make them with a letter and a number, have all the info notebook. Yep, that's exactly. So I write on mine, sometimes I stamp, you can't really see this one. We think alike, I believe, Marie, because I have a T and a 6 on this one. So this is the T6 test tile. I do that as well, and I have a notebook full. And then what I do is after they come out of the kiln, I will go back with a Sharpie marker, and this one had 17 written on it, had a number on it. These were C's, so it was like C1, this was C9, this was C17, and I will go into my notebook, and then with a Sharpie, I will write on the back what it is. So this isn't written on it when it goes in the kiln. This is afterwards, and it just makes it easy so I don't have to look up and go, what was C1? What's C1? And then I have to go find my notebook and look up C1. It's just written on the back, and then I have it. But yeah, I do have a class. We talk about test tiles and keeping track of your test tiles and keeping a notebook for that. And keeping good notes is one of the most important things you can do in pottery. I have notebooks from 23 years ago that I can go back and look. 23 years ago, what was I doing? And I was crazy then, because I would every day keep a little journal entry. And it was like, today I threw 8 vases and trimmed 6 bowls. And then I glazed the kiln and fired the kiln. And then I made clay. And I had it all written down. Like, I don't write those things down anymore. I don't say what I did each day. But the beautiful thing about it is I can look and be like, when did I make that? When did I make that bowl? I'll be like, I made that was an early bowl. And so I can go back and I can actually find out and be like, that's when I made the jellyfish bowl, because I've always called it the jellyfish bowl, you know? So I can actually pinpoint the day I made that piece. I don't work quite like that anymore. I do write things down like weekly, but I don't do it daily. Although maybe I should. Maybe I should. What do you guys think? Daily journaling for the studio? I think so. I think I'm going to start doing it again. All right, so we're giving away a $25 gift certificate. Are you ready to see who won? Are you ready? Kevin says I have to hang on. He's got to get everything ready. I've only got, oh, we got time. We got a few minutes. We can hang out. I can answer more questions about glazes. So, are you ready? Yeah. All right. So, the winner of the $25 gift certificate for the Clayscapes Pottery, you can buy Mayco product. I don't know if there's a limit on what you can use it for. Whatever you want. Is Sherry Hartman. Sherry, congratulations. You've got yourself $25 to go to Clayscapes Pottery and shop and buy some things. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you'll pick some of these glazes. So next in prime time, we are going to be glazing. I've got a bunch of planters and cups that we're going to glaze. I always try to glaze, I always think I'm going to glaze more than I can in the live tutorials because I'm like, I could glaze 5 things. And then at the end of a class, I've got 3 done, maybe. So I'm going to try to do 3, but we will see. We're going to be layering, and I'm really excited for this because we're going to layer them on textured pieces. And yes, I will share the fired results with the world when they're done. So this was a great example of firing on porcelain, and it's smooth porcelain, not textured. But I really want to see some texture, and I do plan to do, probably going to go back and retest all of these on texture just to see. And I do happen to have, where did I put that little plate? Oh, I have a textured plate over there, and I might do that plate as like a partner to this plate, so I can see what these glazes will look like on the texture. All right, see if there's anything else before we go tonight, but I think we're all set. All righty. Well, make sure you guys go to ClayShare.com and sign up for our emails. That way you can be entered in all of our giveaways, and also you can find out what's going on over in ClayShare land and all of our promos. We are going to be having a new premium member class next week. It'll be a hand building class. I'm excited for that. That'll be separate from the lives that we do. And the studio's coming along. I will share more information on that in prime time next with my premium members, so you guys get to know where we're at and what's happening. A lot has happened this week, so you have to wait and see. Oh, one last thing before we go. I don't want to forget. Saratoga, New York. Anybody in the Saratoga, New York area, this coming Saturday, May 6th, 5 p.m. Eastern at Saratoga Clay Art Center, is the opening of Fired On. It's their annual exhibition, and I was the juror for it, and I'm going to be there for the opening reception. I'm going to go to New York just for you all. So if you're going to be in the Saratoga area this coming Saturday between 5 and 7, come out to Saratoga Clay Art Center, check out some great artwork, and you'll get to see me, and I'll get to hang out with you all. All right, that's all my news. That's all I have to share tonight. You guys take care, be well, and make great pots. Bye, everybody.